So this isn't happening in a Big Ten state, but a new Virginia NIL law has come into place. And essentially, this law, in a very simple form, you can go and look it up, but I'm just going to read straight from a CBS article that kind of summarizes it very well. It says the state of Virginia has opted to erase the separation of schools and NIL contracts. The state signed a law in April just being the other day, allowing schools to pay players directly for their NIL rights. The law will go into effect on July 1st. The NCAA currently prohibits schools from paying players via NIL deals, but several schools in Virginia are expected to take advantage of the new state law and ignore the NCAA's rules this summer. As most of you know, the NCAA NIL rules were kind of like abolished earlier this spring because essentially they have no power and the NCAA stinks. And that's that's Zack's favorite line right there. But Sammy, as somebody who has a good amount of experience working with the NIL side of things, obviously, like you talked about, you are having players on from NIL. I mean, what do you think? We'll talk about other states and stuff like that here in a minute, but what do you think this does to NIL collectives? Do you think that schools are kind of like absorb those? Do you think this is a situation where maybe NIL collectives just go away and maybe schools just take all of that and don't even bother with absorbing them? What are your thoughts in this situation, Sammy?
I think this just accelerates everything towards employment, which has its own ups and downs too. It's a risk on both sides. Revenue sharing, I think, is coming, and who knows how quickly it is going to come. Somebody, you'd look 5 years ago and you'd say, "Oh, this would have taken maybe 10 or 15 years," and it's just accelerated. NIL, it's not what it was planned out to be. It was supposed to be, hey, you're our star quarterback. You're going to get the McDonald's deal. Hey, whatever. John Paddock. Well, I'll use John Paddock since he threw for 500 yards against IU. Hey, we're going to get the John Paddock deal at McDonald's this week. You're welcome for that. So, but something like that. Hey, if John Paddock throws 400 yards or more this week, you get free fries or something like that. It's to use that name, image, and likeness, not, we're going to give you $500,000 to appear at some celebrity event and stuff like that. But the NIL collective that IU has, they have three of them. There's Hoosier Hysterics, Hoosiers for Good, and Hoosiers Connect. And Hoosiers Connect and Hoosiers for Good is who we have a lot of experience working with. And Hoosiers for Good signs players and basically assigns them to different charities. So, like if a player goes to Boys and Girls Club, they get paid for that appearance, which I think that's one of the good things to come out of NIL. But now it's essentially pay for play. And if it's going down that road, I do think it goes to employment. And as an employee myself, here's the danger. Employees could be fired and cut and things like that. So I think you're going to say goodbye to scholarships. And it's just going to be a slippery slope in terms of, if you do get a players union or a players association, things like that, it's not as safe as everybody thinks it might be.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting to think about the whole situation with scholarships and contracts and things like that you were kind of alluding to, I think, a little bit there, Sammy. Zack, as far as like the contracts and NIL and those kind of things go, because unfortunately we've seen teams sign players to NIL deals who, I think it was a Michigan State defensive lineman that just signed an NIL deal, went through spring practice, and now he's jumped back into the portal again. So it wasn't even pay for play, it was play for practice, right? I mean, this is a situation where the system is completely broken right now. I mean, is this a situation where, the schools do need to absorb these NIL collectives, or is this a situation where it's like, this is just going to keep causing more issues and we're just going to keep, swirling down until somebody finally takes control of what's going on in college football right now?
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, JR, that until there's firm oversight, which we all know the NCAA does not give, until there is firm oversight, there's going to be a lot of ambiguity. I mean, that's why NIL has spiraled out of control to begin with. It's why we've seen NIL deals be pulled and be extra exorbitant amount of money for some of these players, is because there's no oversight and no leadership and no power. And so because of all those things, you have all these different things going on, which is why I think now states, like state governments, have to get involved. And even that is insufficient, because all this is Virginia is saying there's no separation between school and NIL. And so whether the school decides to absorb the collective or whether they decide to work in tandem, you still have the problem that there's no oversight. And so it's still wild, wild west. And so at some point you have to get someone in there, dare I say a commissioner, if we're going to say pay for play. You have to get somebody who's going to kind of even out the rules, to even if different schools have different amounts of money, right? Like you think of baseball, the Yankees have way more money than other teams. Or if you have a salary cap, which again, that's, I don't know what you do. The reality is, though, you have to do something to give oversight with this. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be the wild, wild west.
I agree. And the transfer portal is a problem, too.
Mm-hmm.
I think putting those together are a problem. You're on mute, JR.
Yeah, it would be one thing if it was just the transfer portal or if it was just NIL, but at the end of the day, when you put those two things together, like you referenced there, Sammy, that does create a very big issue. Ryan, let's get your thoughts on this. When you look at Virginia, obviously they've put this law into effect. This was kind of how it happened with NIL and stuff. I think it was California was the first law that put that, or the first state that put that law into effect, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. Everybody took the law and then went with it. Ryan, do you see this being a similar situation where now that Virginia has passed this law, Illinois, Ohio, Florida, all these other states are going to start doing the same thing? Or is this something where Virginia schools are just going to benefit from it for a good amount of time, possibly even this whole next season, where other teams aren't going to be able to do the same thing?
I don't see it lasting long with just one or two states. I think you just can't with how important, Division I athletics is and how much money is to be made in these. I don't see other states just holding, still for years. Maybe some for a season, but I don't see a long time, because you can't allow a team like Virginia Tech, like in the ACC, you can't have Virginia and Virginia Tech having a leg up over, not just Carolina and Duke, but think how far behind NC State and Wake Forest could get, right? Because they're really not sexy. It's like they're the afterthought in the state. So, Duke and North Carolina are going to do what they need to, financially, I believe. But, some of these other schools cannot get that far behind to where, you're a year or two behind and you're already in the middle to lower tier of the conference anyway with like NIL and stuff. So I think you're going to see a lot of other states make changes. But I also think, in the grand scheme of things, I don't see this in the next year or two. There's going to be some sort of cap, or there's going to be some figure or form's going to come in and take control of this, because it's beyond the Wild West. That's why coaches are like, we've already talked about, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, like Boeheim, Krzyzewski, Jay Wright wants out of this because it's a mess. They don't want to deal with it. And that's why Tom Izzo in basketball has just kind of been fed up and sick about how it is with the transfer portal, and he's being forced to do things I don't think he ever wanted to do. So I think eventually, sooner than later, there's going to be some sort of structure. And yes, it's not going to come from necessarily the NCAA, but there has to be, because at the end of the day, I mean, it really won't be, will it be college athletics anymore? I mean, it's just, what will it be when the players are making, some of the players are going to be making more than their head coaches here soon. If you're looking at these numbers being thrown around today, $2 for some of these players, they're going to be making more than the entire staff. It's just it's getting out of hand, and I know a lot of the coaches are fed up with it, and that's my take on it. I think definitely the first would be more states are going to jump in for sure. Jr.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a really good point about players making more than the coaches. I don't have hard and fast numbers, but I was told by somebody who was close with Ohio State that Corey Dennis last year, the Ohio State quarterback coach, he made less than $1 million. Will Howard this year is making more than $1 million. If Corey Dennis continued to be at Ohio State, Will Howard would be making more money this season than his position coach, Corey Dennis, was making. That's incredible.
It did that come into that, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly. I mean, how can you coach a player when he just has the ultimate veto card of like, I make more than you, be quiet, right? Now, obviously, that probably is not actually happening, but it's definitely a possibility. So, I mean, at the end of the day, NIL collectives are going to struggle with this, I believe. I think this is something that's gonna, like I said, go across college football at some point, kind of like the California law, and at this point, colleges are just gaining more and more power. But at the same time, players are also gaining more power as well. It's the most player empowerment we've ever seen. And like you were referencing, Ryan, with seeing coaches in college basketball leave, we've seen coaches like Nick Saban retire early because of what's going on here. Jeff Hafley from Boston College, it's presumed that that was one of the reasons why he left. Chip Kelly, it was presumed that's one of the reasons why he didn't want to have a head coaching role anymore, is because of some of the stuff that's going on there where he just wants to be a coordinator and coach football and doesn't want to worry about the NIL and things like that as much. And so
at least we got a football game out of it, guys,
Yeah. At least we got a football game. So
yeah.